Grab a drink, make yourself comfortable. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Earthbound Beer and MOFU and Snack Catering for the food and the beer tonight. Let's give them a big hand. And thanks to Jessup Design and Nebula. Jessup's doing our filming tonight, and Nebula, of course, for this great space. So thanks to you guys, too. My name is Allan Hug. I live here just a few blocks away. I'm a partner of a small public affairs company called KO Media. And we're tasked with a lot of different things. We do work on some candidate campaigns, but issue-based campaigns tends to be where it's at for us. And I've done everything from Metropolitan Sewer District, which is a real yawner, to things in the future such as renewable energy, controversial issues such as fracking, which we see a lot of that in the news right now. And this issue about bringing marijuana reform laws here to Missouri. So that's why we're all here. And you know, we're behind Show Me Cannabis. We're going to talk a little bit about the coalition tonight and some of the legislative efforts that are being put forth. So to kick things off, I want to, kind of the landscape of local politics is changing and definitely for the better. So we have a couple of our candidates here tonight that are going to say a couple of words. Cara Spencer, why don't we we'll start with you, and then we're going to follow up here with Stephen Jehle. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. My name is Cara Spencer. Welcome to Nebula. This is a collaborative workspace for those of you who haven't been here before. The irony is that this is a former probation office. So as you know, many of the arrests here in the city of St. Louis are marijuana related. And I'm assuming many of them were dealt with here in the probation facility. So I'm running for Alderman of the 20th Ward. This is actually the northeast corner of the 20th Ward, and it goes down south all the way to Merrimack. We have a really diverse community here in the 20th Ward, and one of the reasons I'm running is because we have a tremendously high crime rate. We've got a little pocket of crime down here on the south side, which is here in the 20th Ward. And much of our crime is drug-related. You know, in the city of St. Louis, there's also a huge racial disparity in marijuana arrests. I think the statistic put out by the ACLU this last year was that a person of color is 18 times more likely to be arrested than a white person for possession of marijuana, and that is an incredible statistic. You know, when we legalized marijuana in the state of Colorado, I think they pull in about $1 million a month in revenue. This is something that our city could greatly, greatly use. So as an elected official, I'm going to be pushing to, you know, do a lot of work to alleviate our crime rates down here, one of which would be to push legalization of marijuana. And I think that the city of St. Louis could do that with or without the state, a similar way that we did, you know, push the envelope with marriage equality. Just go ahead and push the envelope and see what the state does. So, yeah.
Hasn't marijuana possession been decriminalized within the city of St. Louis?
You know, I'm not entirely sure how all of that works out, to be quite honest. I don't know the ins and outs of how decriminalization works in the city of St. Louis. But whether or not it's totally criminalized, I think it should be legalized across the board. So yes.
You mentioned that the city itself could legalize marijuana?
Well, sure. I mean, so what the city of St. Louis did with marriage equality is they just started marrying people, gay couples down at City Hall. And they forced the state to come to the table and do something about it.
So could any city do that?
You know, I mean, I think that is something that could be open to the legal, you know, but it's definitely something that we should be looking into.
So I can get my little suburb community to legalize marijuana?
Well, I mean, like I said, so with marriage equality, right, so the city of St. Louis legalized, or just started issuing marriage license, right, and they forced the state of Missouri to do something about it and to look into whether or not they, you know, that was a city, that was a legal thing to do, so. I think what we should be doing is pushing the envelope is what I'm saying, so.
So city by city rather than the whole state?
And then I think we should force the state of Missouri to look at, what we should be doing as the entire state of Missouri. I'm not an expert in legislation yet, but I hope to be very soon. So I think our panelists will probably talk about some of this. So I think we should probably leave most of these questions to our panelists. But
this particular coalition is a statewide coalition, just so all of you know. This will be something that'll have to pass throughout the entire state.
Right, and I just think that the city of St. Louis could push that envelope.
Absolutely. I mean, with over 4 million registered voters, the St. Louis metro area is key to helping that too. Absolutely. Thank you. Next up is Stephen Jehle.
Thanks for the introduction, Allan. I'm Stephen Jehle. I'm running for Alderman of the 20th Ward as a progressive independent in the upcoming April 7th general election. I'm honored to be here tonight to show my support for Show Me Cannabis and the work that they've been doing to end cannabis prohibition in the state of Missouri. There was a question earlier tonight about St. Louis cities. You did the question? Okay. So the city of St. Louis has made a push towards legalization. Alderman Cohn in 2013 introduced legislation that tried to get, well, it effectively decriminalized marijuana for anything under 35 grams. There are still fines from $100 to $500 on those amounts of marijuana, and it's considered a misdemeanor. Now, I would like to get rid of those fines. I'd also like to legalize marijuana for the whole state. But it takes pushes like that in cities like this around America to legalize it for, the whole United States. But it takes states like Missouri to do that. We're a progressive state. That's why Show Me Cannabis is here. And that's why I'm glad to have the support of Show Me Cannabis. There's a huge economic boom that can happen if we legalize cannabis here in the state of Missouri. There's many entrepreneurs that are here, ready to go. There's many more entrepreneurs that moved on to states like California, Colorado, Washington, to start and work in the cannabis industry. They're ready to move back. They're from here. They want to live here. They want to live where their families live. They want to live in a state that's one of the best states in the United States to grow cannabis. Before cannabis was made illegal, 1937, this was one of the highest producers of hemp in the United States, Missouri. There's other benefits cannabis legalization, such as reducing crime, which we've talked about here tonight, and incarceration rate. If marijuana is no longer a crime, the people aren't going to be getting charged with felonies. They're not going to be going to prison. They're going to be able to get jobs. They're going to be able to take care of their families. They're going to be able to be productive members of society. The school to prison pipeline that we have in this country that makes our prisons comparable to Russian gulags will slow. And there's no reason this shouldn't happen. The FDA has already legalized 2 cannabinoid drugs. It's an effective treatment for many illnesses. I've seen it myself. I've seen people suffering from cancer, people suffering from multiple sclerosis. Use cannabis as treatment, an effective treatment. And as Alderman of the 20th Ward, I will work to make that push as a legislator in the city of St. Louis. And I will do whatever I can to help Show Me Cannabis legalize marijuana in the state of Missouri. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Thank you, Cara. Appreciate all your support and help. Hey, a lot of good points, and we're going to talk about this tonight. To give you a little bit of a format, John Payne, I believe, is going to speak next. He's the executive director with Show Me Cannabis, kind of spearheading this charge in Jefferson City. And then you're going to hear from two of our lobbyists that are introducing bills right now. Couple points that were made, and they were exactly right. Missouri was #2 prior to World War II in cannabis production. We were only beat by the state of Kentucky. And as far as the war on drugs, we've got a lot of data. We don't want to have you guys swim in data, but there is a group that supports us. They're called the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. It's made up of judges and police officers and attorneys that support the decriminalization of marijuana. And you look at some of these numbers, and you look at the war on drugs, you know, in the last 30 years, 40 years, that the money that we're spending, it just goes up like a hockey stick. Actually, it's opposite for you guys, so it goes like this. Yet the number of users and addiction rates are exactly the same and flat. So is that really good use of our money? I don't think so. So we'll get into some of that here in just a moment, but next up is John Payne, Executive Director of Show Me Cannabis.
All right, thank you, Allan. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here. We've really made tremendous strides in this state over the last 2 years, particularly in the last year. I really just couldn't even imagine, you know, sitting here in front of basically an overflow crowd like this when I first took this job 3 years ago. So I'd like all of you to give yourselves a big round of applause, because this is not possible without all of you. It really isn't. So we're here tonight to primarily talk about what's coming up in the legislative session, and I'm primarily going to let Lynne talk about most of that. But I'll just say that, you know, we're primarily focused on, in the legislature, industrial hemp, medical cannabis, and also probably expungement this year. But we're also going to be working on an initiative petition for 2016. I think many of you have probably heard about that. And, you know, hopefully we will be going for full legalization in 2016. We have our ballot language back from the Secretary of State right now. We're raising money to do polling, and that polling will dictate whether we have to make any changes to that, because we don't want to be going out there and putting something on the ballot that can't pass. If we're putting something on the ballot, we want to make sure it's something that has a fighting chance at the very least. We don't want to spend a lot of resources for something that ultimately gets on the ballot and fails. That's just not smart politics there. So the way I sort of see this is like a pincer movement, which I don't know if you're very familiar with military strategy, but basically the goal of a pincer movement is to encircle your enemy and then move in from two different sides. And so the you know, you're moving in through the legislature with a bunch of different bills on different topics like medical cannabis, industrial hemp, all these different things. And then you also have the initiative petition that's coming in that and that's one of the good things about the state of Missouri, that we can put pressure on our legislature through the initiative petition, that they know that, hey, this is out there, that the citizens will bypass you, state legislature, if you don't get your act together and start passing some sensible reforms. And that's there's a lot of other states that are out there that don't have that option. So we should really be thankful that that exists, because without that, they're not going to, a lot of legislatures just won't take that sort of action. It's sort of like the sword of Damocles. It's a sword of Damocles, and I believe it's Greek mythology, was a sword that hung over a ruler's head, and then if the string was cut, it would kill him. And so it was something that was always there threatening him, and that's exactly what the initiative petition is for the legislature. If they don't pay attention to it, well, then they'll lose all control of the issue. And so that's what we're you know, we don't necessarily want to force them to lose all control of the issue, but if they won't act on it, then we will. So there's a lot of other things that we're doing to build support before we actually, get that to the ballot or even get to the point of gathering signatures. One thing that we've just approved, that our board has just approved, is the creation of a new advisory board. We're going to start approaching organizations that are interested in getting involved and supporting our organization in an official capacity to serve as on an advisory board that will offer literally advice and also help network us to other groups in the state and help us fundraise and also sort of build credibility. I think one thing that this issue has suffered from, not just in this state, but all across the country, is that people see it as a peripheral issue, as almost a joke issue, that this issue doesn't matter. So I think we have to reach out to serious political groups that have been well established for a long time and say, hey, will you help us? Will you join with us to help us in this fight? And by building that coalition, we can show that we are the force to accomplish this goal to end cannabis prohibition in the state of Missouri. And now another way that you guys can help us in that goal is that you can join us we're actually going to have a lobby day down in Jefferson City. It's scheduled for February 10th. And if you would like to come down and speak to your legislators, then we would love to have you come down there. And this really does have a big impact. A lot of people think, well, I'm just one person. What is talking to my legislator going to do? Well, it's true you're just one person, but when a person makes the trip all the way down to Jefferson City, a legislator looks at that and goes, well, if that person made that trip, how many other people in my district think like that person? Because there's probably a whole lot of other people that didn't have the time or the resources or the inclination to come down to Jefferson City, but think the same way that person does if there's this person that's sitting in my office talking to me right now. So if you're interested in that, that's definitely something that, talk to me after this, send me an email, get my card, and we can help organize carpools, bring you down to Jefferson City, and arrange appointments for you with your legislator on February 10th or other times. We're going down to Jefferson City at all different times. February 10th is probably going to be our biggest day, but there's going to be other times that we're going down there, and so it doesn't have to be set in stone on that particular day. Also, another thing is obviously fundraising. We've been having a big fundraising pledge drive this month with the goal of raising $50,000 by the end of the month. We just had a money bomb last week, and we've raised we had a goal of $10,000 over the 4-day weekend or the 3-day weekend, and we raised about $9,000. So not quite 10, but that's still very good. We're almost, I think we've raised about $35,000 this month so far, which is very, very good. Let me tell you, that is much better than when I first started this job. $35,000, that would have been like 3 months of fundraising. So we are doing incredibly better on that front, but it's also something that we're going to have to continue to improve upon because initiative campaigns especially are very expensive. That's probably something that will in the end cost in the neighborhood of $5 million or so. And again, that's something that you look at and you think, well, I'm one person, what could I possibly do to that? Because, very few people are able to write a $10,000 check, and that's totally understandable. That's not very, who has those kind of resources? Very, very few people do. But, most people have the ability to, give $5, $10 a month. And if you're able to do that, I would encourage you to become a monthly contributor. And I'm not asking you to do anything that I don't do myself. I actually contribute $50 a month to this cause because it is something that I believe in very, very, very deeply. And so my money is very firmly where my mouth is. And then also, oh wait, I guess that is about it. So I will pass it back to Allan real quick. But I want to thank you again for being here. And I look forward to taking your questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed a couple hands go up, and we will address those questions, so don't forget what those are. John hit it right on the head. I mean, it could cost, a conservative budget for this would be $5 million statewide. I mean, you look at billboards and print ads and direct mail and online videos. All of that costs money to produce and deploy. And I don't think, and I'm not going to rule it out, but I don't think that we're going to have a bunch of corporations that come in and join together and write us a big check. So it's going to be, it already is very much a grassroots effort. And what we can do is tell our friends, tell our local business owners. I'm going to speak at the end to a really cool vehicle that we have to help raise money where it's really fun for everyone. And before we get there, I just want to introduce Lynne Schlosser. Lynne is our lobbyist in Jeff City. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the bills and the direction that we're going. Real quick, I want to just predicate that to say that, you know, hey, it'd be great just to lift prohibition, but there is going to be kind of a route to our success. And some of that will be in-depth polling to find out what is possible in the state of Missouri. We want to make sure we get our foot in the door. And if full legalization is not possible, then let's push for medical and decriminalization and industrial use of hemp. So I'm going to let these two folks speak to that. First is Lynne. Thanks.
Thanks, Allan. I first want to take a second to recognize Representative Jake Hummel, who's here with us tonight. He's our minority floor leader for the state of Missouri, and thanks for coming, Jake. He's in the back. I wanted to start real quick and touch base on a couple of our successes last year in the Missouri legislature. Personally, I was a little bit surprised when we were able to get several hearings on bills and pass bills out of committees unanimously in the Missouri legislature. We had a hemp bill last year for industrial hemp to legalize it here in the state of Missouri so that we'd be able to grow and manufacture instead of bringing it into the state and having to actually import it from other countries. The bill was passed out with only one no vote, and for those that were there, we had some of the best comments I've ever had in my 16 years at the Capitol from legislators, telling me it was one of the best hearings they've ever attended. They didn't know they couldn't smoke hemp. They knew nothing about industrial hemp, and that's what hearings are for, to inform. And they said it was one of the best formatted, if you will, with our speakers and our witnesses that they've ever seen. We also had a medical marijuana bill that was passed unanimously out of the Senate General Laws Committee last year. We had a CBD oil bill that passed last year, which we thought was a great first step to getting something passed for medical marijuana. The bill only allows for people that have irretractable epilepsy to get the CBD oil, but we still think that was one step forward in the right direction, being able to pass that. And once the bill was filed, we had all of leadership in the House sponsored the bill, and it passed very quickly. They pushed it through. To our benefit, one of our senators has a son who actually suffers from irretractable epilepsy, who was very critical in passing the legislation. Missouri did take one step toward decriminalizing marijuana possession. They got rid of past and persistent offenders in the crime bill. They also changed the possession statewide to, I believe it's 10 grams. There's like two different phases. I think it's 10 grams and then 23 before it's ever a felony offense again. So it takes it to a misdemeanor. It's still not what City of St. Louis has or the City of Columbia, but it is a step forward in the right direction. This year we have an industrial hemp bill being filed in the Senate by a Republican, Senator Rob Shaw from St. Joe, Missouri. His district happens to be one of, back when we didn't have prohibition, it was one of the largest hemp growing areas in our state. He is very proud to file this bill. He actually filed it a little quickly, so there's actually some nicks in the legislation that still have to be fixed before we hear it in committee. It's Senate Bill number 255, if you want to look at it at all, and that will allow the state of Missouri to, that will allow the state of Missouri Missourians to file for a permit and be able to grow, process, and sell hemp inside our state. Senator Rob Schaaf, and he's from St. Joe, Missouri. And then Representative Paul Kurtman, who is a Republican from the Washington, Missouri area, is going to be filing the companion bill in the House of Representatives. We will have a bill that will be filed in the Senate by Senator Brian Munzlinger, who is a big farmer in the state of Missouri, and he is going to be filing a pilot program for industrial hemp. He is a big supporter of industrial hemp as a whole, but he wanted to take a baby step and start with a pilot program, fashioned after a couple other states that passed it. Currently, there are 21 states, I believe, that have some form of hemp legislation, and of them, I think 6 have a pilot program to allow universities and colleges to study it. His question to me And 2, Farm Bureau and a couple other folks were, how do we know as farmers what kind of equipment we need, how do we harvest it, and how do we process, or in what form? So he's trying to get some of those questions answered before he files his legislation. Senator Jason Holzman from the Kansas City area will again be filing a medical cannabis bill. I spoke to him on Thursday before I left Jefferson City, and he's still not quite sure what exactly that bill is going to look like. He said he's still working on language, so we're not sure what all that will entail at this time, but it definitely will be a full medical cannabis bill. Senator Joe Cavaney from here in St. Louis is filing a bill to expand the CBD oil bill that we passed last year. So his bill will extend the CBD oil to several other disease groups, as well as other conditions that happen as a result of disease, from nausea. We put post-traumatic stress disorder in there. It's got cancer, and I think 4 or 5 other serious illnesses. It also, his language also allows, the original CBD oil bill only allowed a neurologist to make the suggestion or the recommendation for CBD oil. This bill actually expands it to all practitioners, as well as APRNs, which are advanced practicing registered nurses, and allows them to make the recommendation for patients to use CBD oil as well. Excuse me, Representative Keith English from North County will be filing a companion bill in the House. He currently has filed a bill for a medical pilot program, but he's going to withdraw it and put the CBD oil expansion bill in instead. And then we have a Republican Representative, Dave Hinson from from St. Elizabeth area, St. Robert, sorry, who's going to be filing a medical marijuana bill. It's actually going to be known as the Missourians for Compassionate Care Act. He told me he'd have language on Monday. Excuse me, I haven't seen it yet. He told me it will be fairly tight, highly regulated, and he feels that he has a bill that leadership would actually endorse and would help move forward in the House at least. But we haven't seen any language on that yet, so we hope to have that by next Monday. Personally, I think that we are in a great position to pass legislation. I really was shocked and surprised last year when I came on board with Show Me Cannabis that it's not a partisan issue, and there are people that want this passed now. Some don't really want to vote on it themselves, unfortunately, but they know it's coming and they want to be a part of it. With the petition already being filed and out there, they know if they don't have a hand in some of this legislation and pass it themselves, then they don't have a say in what actually goes into law. So it's actually prompted some of them to step to the plate and be a little bit more active on the issue. So we're hoping for a really great year. And definitely if you can come down on the 10th, we really, we count on our volunteers. You're the reason that we were able to move stuff forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. So a lot going on. We're going to pass the mic here just a moment to Gary Wiegert, but before we do, something that I learned at one of these events several months ago, we have a gentleman who's in law enforcement. Some of these guys, DEA, narcotics, are coming forward to say, hey, this is a bunch of bull. And he was telling us that they're studying the states that have passed, such as Washington and Colorado. And I thought this was just fascinating, that because of the legalization is taking the ditchweed off the streets. The ditchweed on the streets is being sold by Mexican cartel. Mexican cartel doesn't have the bankrolls anymore to fund the heroin. So heroin's becoming a rock star drug again. Prices go up, kids can't get a hold of it. So I think that's just a great, great thing. Another ancillary benefit to what we're doing here. Just save your questions, thanks. We're going to answer questions at the very end just for the sake of time. So please just hold on to your questions and we'll go through the audience. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I've been told that heroin is still cheaper than marijuana.
Well, it very well could be because of the economics of that here, where it's illegal and there's a black market. Getting rid of that black market can help that drug go back up where it needs to be, or eliminate it altogether. All right, next up is Gary Wiegert. Thanks, Gary.
Okay, my name is Gary Wiegert. I'm a police officer in St. Louis City. Have been for 34 and a half years now. And I always have to start off with a little disclaimer. I am a police officer, but any comments made by me here are solely my comments, not the official comments of St. Louis Police Department. And that is the result. I have to give that little disclaimer because originally when the police department found out that I was lobbying for Show Me Cannabis, it got restricted. A good attorney I brought on, L. Watkins, we sued and we won. We now have that ability to, I have that ability now to lobby for Show Me Cannabis. And a little interesting story, the day they approved me to lobby, they also sent me down to take a pee test. And but that's the mindset of the police department. And I did pass that test, by the way. Thank you. On a side note, too, I've never smoked marijuana in my life. I know it sounds strange, but I've never smoked it in my whole life. I wonder if I could just talk without... Can you hear this?
Probably need to use the mic.
Better if I didn't use
No, you'll need to use the mic. It's echoey in here.
Two things. I lobby for Show Me Cannabis, but I also lobby for St. Louis Tea Party. So I want to talk a little bit about a Tea Party viewpoint on this, and also talk a little bit about the police viewpoint on this. 2 years ago, I guess almost 3 years ago now, when I originally went down to the legislature and brought up the issue of cannabis, people actually laughed me out of the office. Well, that's no longer the case. Now we have people who are sponsoring bills. It's picked up momentum. We passed the CBD oil bill last year. That's a baby step. So this thing is picking up more momentum, especially as it passes across the country. Now, the Tea Party point of view, the Tea Party, St. Louis Tea Party supports this, and a number of Tea Parties support marijuana legalization. And I'll give you the three tenets why they basically support it. First one is fiscal responsibility. That's the main tenet of the Tea Party. There is so much cost. Now, I've made hundreds of marijuana arrests over the years, and it really hasn't had an impact on anything. What it does is you spend time doing the arrest, the booking, conveying to the station. This takes a lot of paperwork, takes a lot of time, impacts a lot of people's lives. You have the cost of the courts, and we really haven't had a return, and I haven't seen any change on that over the years. Nothing is different on that, and I'll talk a little bit later from the police aspect of that. The second thing is freedom from government tyranny. Now, tyranny is kind of a strong word. You know, people think of like overthrowing the government on things like that. But tyranny is other things, and that is the federal government coming in here and telling us here in the state of Missouri what we have to do. And that is not the business of the federal government to tell us what we do here in Missouri. A lot of people get this idea mixed up with states' rights. States don't have rights. Let's get that straight. Only individuals have rights. States do not have rights. But states do have state authority. And the state needs to determine what we do in regards to marijuana. What most people don't know, and this is an incident involving state authority, is when police seize money for asset forfeiture, state law says that money should go to the revolving school fund. But what we do here is we seize money, and I've done it in the past. We seize money. The federal government comes in and takes that money through DEA. They keep 20%, and then they kick 80% back to the local police department. And that is wrong. I've had that where police departments have come into St. Louis City. They do a consent to search. They take off with the money and the drugs and then leave us here with the prisoners, and then we got to do this paperwork. But the reason they concentrate on this is because they want that money. And they don't mind giving up that 20% when they get 80% back locally. So that is an incident of states' authority where it should be up to the states to do this and not up to the federal government to tell us what we do with this asset forfeiture money. Another tenet of the Tea Party is free markets. And this is especially true with the industrial hemp. When we had a hearing in the industrial hemp committee, one of the legislators asked, how much do you get per acre to grow industrial hemp? And here's the answer on that. It will get whatever the market will bear. There is no cost per acre. It's the true free market. It is you will receive whatever someone will pay. And that is another tenet of the St. Louis Tea Party. I'd like to talk a little bit about police work involving marijuana. When I first came on the police department, we would make a stop, have someone with marijuana, we'd wad it up, throw it in the wind, you throw it away. In fact, if you made a marijuana arrest, the other police, a lot of them would make fun of you, and they'd laugh at it. Because it's a very minor arrest, and especially when I came on in the early 1980s, we had a lot of big problems, kind of like we do right now, as a matter of fact. But you just don't have that time for those marijuana arrests. But unfortunately, times have changed. So I don't know if most of you follow things like hotspot policing. Hotspot policing is kind of like stop and frisk in New York, only by a different name. And what happens is you have police departments, they go into an area, and the only way they can measure success is by the amount of arrests. So you have a hotspot policing where you come in, the police come in, they stop pretty much everybody that moves. And what do? You take the easiest arrest you can find. You take that bench warrant arrest, somebody who's got a bench warrant, which is quite a few people. In fact, I think if we ran a few people in here, we'd probably knock down a few bench warrant arrests. There's a lot of people who haven't paid their tickets. And then same with the marijuana. It's a very simple arrest, but police departments measure that as being a success, when in fact I don't think it does much good. Another thing about hotspot policing. Hotspot policing, one time I saw a roll call where you have like 40 policemen. They were up at the, I saw these policemen standing up at the, having a roll call at, it's the Gravway Plaza there where all the stores are, and there's like 40 policemen lined up, and they line up in a row, and we do the inspections, and they hold up their guns in the air. We hold up our guns. We make sure they have their guns and their badges and whatnot. And I thought, what kind of message does this send to people who are shopping in that plaza? You have policemen here, 40 of them, and people think that makes them feel safe. I think that makes them think, where am I shopping at, where we have to have 40 policemen standing out here with guns? So I think that is the wrong approach to do with hotspot policing. Now, and if I could compare hotspot policing a little bit with stop and frisk, I've made thousands of arrests based on stop and frisk. It's the most important thing you do with police work. Where that goes wrong is when you have a department that tells you who is suspicious and who isn't. So if your department tells you you're going to make 10 suspicious stops, what are you going to do? You're going to stop the first 10 people you see. We don't do that here with stop and frisk. So when I do see somebody suspicious, I write it in the report, I note it, and that is how you do police work. But once you have an organization that says we will determine who is suspicious for you, now you have problems, and that's why I'm against the stop and frisk tactics that they do. Not only that, but you alienate pretty much the whole community who gets mad at you for doing it. Back online. So now we now arrest people now more with marijuana because we have things like the cameras in the cars. Before, the policeman could just discard the marijuana, throw it away. That isn't going to happen anymore. It is now all recorded. It is all on camera. And if you're a police officer and you discard that marijuana, you will be in trouble. We just had a policewoman was suspended, I think a day or two, for not making an arrest and letting the guy go with the marijuana. So that's why now it's amazing. You would think by now, after the 35 years I've been on the department, that marijuana arrests would go down, but actually they have in fact gone up. And so that's why we need to change some of these rules. I always wrap this up with telling a little story. Poor John's had to hear this a million times. Police work is about priorities. So as a policeman, of course, you want to catch those major criminals. And you can't do that if you're spending time with these little marijuana arrests. And, you know, one little side note, just last night, a guy picks up two guys on Ohio, drives them up over on Dixon to go buy some marijuana. And so what happens? The guy pulls out two guns and robs the guy. So he robs them, they're going to buy the marijuana. So now we have a robbery, victim of a robbery, another statistic, another robbery in St. Louis City. And all because if marijuana was legal, you can run to the store and buy it, run to the dispensary and buy it. So just another crime stat here in St. Louis. But I tell this last little story to just show you how we need to prioritize what police do. When I was detached to a unit called the Street Corner Apprehension Team. So what we do is we'd go in and you see a guy standing on the corner. You go in, you buy, with some marked money, you go buy some crack, and then we would swoop in and arrest him. And once you make that transition, he's got that marked money. So we had a number of, down in the 3rd District, we had a number of robberies where they were shooting the people buying cocaine. So we had to combat this problem. We knew it was some dealers who were shooting the customers. So we set up the SCAT unit. We reinstituted the SCAT unit. I was one of the backup guys, one of the backup officers. And so we had a buyer driving around trying to buy cocaine. So what happened was there were so many people that were trying to sell marijuana, they would send me in and have to go run them off the corner, actually throw the marijuana dealers off the corner. Because we had so many people trying to flip marijuana, we needed to make that cocaine arrest so we can find out who was doing these murders. So eventually, after we ran a number of them off, our buyer goes up, buys the cocaine, guy makes the exchange with the $20 at that time. And so as we come in, I always tell this part of the story too, he tries to eat the money. I know it sounds funny, but eating money is very difficult. you know, it's cloth. It's very hard to eat. And so then, you know, we have to get the money out of his mouth. I'm sure everybody here would have probably been photographing us back then and would have been terrible people. But we get the money out of his mouth and we arrest him. But prior to the time we arrested him, as the buyer is there, and this is all on tape, he says, hey, don't make me have to shoot you like I shot that guy 2 nights ago. So it's like, wow, we've got him. So we lock him up, we bring him in, we read him his rights, tell him he's charged with murder, he admitted the murder, and you could see it go across his face. His legs went to jelly because he knew now we had him on tape. So he told us that he didn't do the murder. He knows who did. He had witnesses who watched that murder, but he was just bragging. He told us where the gun was. He told us the whole incident. And we were able to solve that murder. And the reason we were able to solve that murder is because we prioritized what we need to do. We could have took every one of those marijuana arrests that we had to shoo away, and we picked the importance that we needed to do. And so this is no different than what it is right now. We need to go ahead and change our marijuana laws. That way the police can focus on what's really important. And thank you for allowing me to come speak, and thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you all.
Thanks, Gary. That was really informative. I'd love to hear your standpoint as a law enforcement. I think it gives everyone a little sense of ease, because as we've been going out talking to the community, we never really have any opposition, but sometimes we have some people that are kind of just in the closet about the issue. You know, it's like, hey, I'm going to support it, but I don't want to say that too loud, and they kind of look over their shoulder. So I appreciate you saying what you have. Lastly, before we get to the questions, and I want to talk a little bit about the legislative process and how we may have to go to the ballot to vote and how you guys can get involved with that. But business owners, well, first of all of you, if you haven't texted SMC for Show Me Cannabis, SMC to 420-420 to be part of our text messaging database. We've got almost 12,000, over 12,000 now, similar with our email list, 76,000 organic likes and growing. So stay tuned there so you know when C for Cannabis is going to launch. C for Cannabis is a program that we're putting together. It's kind of like a Yelp type of program for businesses where we just spend our money when we have some free time. So if you go to a restaurant, Culinary for Cannabis, there's your restaurants listed, cocktails for cannabis. You even get, go to a salon, cuts for cannabis. You take a yoga class, get a massage, clinicians for cannabis. The list goes on and on and on. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it. So it's going to be kind of a Yelp type directory with different events and businesses that support marijuana. And what we're asking the business owners to do is to be part of it, and we will help promote your business. Hey, put a cocktail on the menu, host an event on a night that you're a little bit slow. Let's do a keep the change for cannabis, change for cannabis. Hey, round up that cup of coffee for cannabis. Round it up, from $1.75 to $2. So lots of creative ways that we can all get together and kind of pitch in without it, being such a heavy lift. So keep an eye out for that. We anticipate launching that in April 20th. Anybody get that? April 20th? Yeah, a few of us, of this year. So real quick, we're going to get the questions, but I want to, I'm going to embarrass a couple of people real fast. We have Color for Cannabis about artists, and I'm looking around faces, and Phil Jarvis is here tonight. Phil, just raise your hand. Phil's internet. He's not a spotlight guy, but he's such a talented guy, internationally known. He's been commissioned recently to do some work in Italy, I know. And another gentleman, I couldn't believe he walked in, was Pokey Lafarge. Concerts for Cannabis. You might have caught Pokey on David Letterman. I mean, we've got some real, local celebrities here and beyond. So thanks for being here, guys. I really appreciate it. When we get into questions really fast, I want you guys to talk a little bit about the legislative process. Now, our legislator has the ability to make laws, but sometimes it comes to us for public vote. And we're anticipating having to do that in November of 2016, which will be the presidential election. Now, prior to doing that, there is going to be an opportunity for us to gather signatures, another vital part of the process. We need 64,000 valid signatures from registered voters in the state. So in order to get registered voters, because we're talking to a lot of stoners, we might get 300,000 because half of them might not be registered to vote. So we got to make sure that you're actually registered to vote and you live in Missouri. But anyway, so if you guys would speak to that, then we'll open up the questions, and then afterwards we'll stick around for beer, cocktails, and food from MOFU and snack. Thanks.
So I will just go ahead and give you kind of the basis of the legislative process, and it actually has changed a little bit this year. With new House leadership, they have adopted new House rules and have a little bit of a new structure over there. So once a bill is filed, the legislation is filed, it is hopefully assigned to a committee. Once it's assigned to a committee, it has a committee hearing. And those are public hearings where witnesses from the public can testify and the sponsor will present the legislation. If the bill is voted to pass out of those committees, it will then, now in the House, go to a second tier of committees called a select standing committee that serves as basically a rules committee that will not hear any public testimony. The sponsors will present those bills, and if it's passed out of that committee, then it'll end up heading to the floor calendar and go to the House floor for debate. On the Senate side, it's a similar process, except that there is no second tier of committees. If a bill is voted out of committee, it can be placed on the Senate calendar and brought to the Senate floor. Once passed off as House floor or the Senate floor, they change sides and the process starts all over again. So it can be kind of a long process. And this year there are new rules both in the House and the Senate. I was told the Senate has now changed their rules on assigning bills, so it's going to take a little bit longer to get bills assigned to a committee, which isn't always advantageous when we're trying to move legislation and move it quickly. We'd like to try to get stuff moving on our behalf earlier, sooner than later. Last year, our hemp bill only got waylaid because it was passed out of committee too late to take it to the floor. So we're hoping to move things faster this year. But that's really kind of the basic process that we go through to pass legislation.
One quick thing on the distinction between what the legislature can just pass as a bill and it just becomes law, and so that's they pass it. It passes both the House and the Senate, then it goes to the governor and he either signs it or he just waits a while and doesn't sign it, which is probably what he will do on anything given on this issue, knowing our governor, and then it becomes law without his signature. But also what the legislature can do is they can punt on an issue, basically. They can say, okay, so we think this is an issue that's important enough that we're going to let you guys vote on it because we don't really want to take a stance on it all that much. So we're gonna vote on it here, and we're going to let you guys, it'll pass the House and the Senate, and we'll vote to put it on the ballot on a certain election. So, I think, for instance, if a medical cannabis, we wouldn't call it a bill, but it would be called a joint resolution. Haha. If one of those started moving, it's quite possible, particularly with medical cannabis, I think it would be likely that that would be referred to the ballot and not passed straight up as a bill. And so it's quite possible that in 2016 we could be looking at two things on the ballot, both medical cannabis and full legalization. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of years over the next, basically 20 months or so.
All right, let's go ahead and go for questions real fast. I'm just going to pass the mic so everyone can hear.
I have a question for Lynn. You mentioned that the hemp bill didn't get to the floor last year.
Correct.
Does that mean that it's dead and they have to start all over again?
Yeah, in Missouri, our process in Missouri is all bills start over every year. Unlike the federal government or even the state of Kansas, they carry over for 2 years or for a legislative session. Our bills have to start over every year from the beginning. So we'll start again. And this year we have 2 Republicans filing it in the House and the Senate, and we have a pretty good feeling. The difference now is we have different committees. So the committee that heard it last year will not be the same committee that hears the bill this year.
I was going to add something onto that, just that, so yeah, that bill is dead, but the one thing is after it's been heard, at least if you're dealing with a legislature that has a lot of the same legislators, that when you introduce a similar bill, it's a lot easier to move it through the process because if the same committee or at least a committee comprised of a lot of the same people hears that bill again, they go, oh yeah, I remember this, and they can move it along pretty quickly. So it's a lot easier to move a bill that's been heard before the next year, even if it died the previous year.
Yes, I'm just confused. I thought the St. Louis police are not supposed to arrest people in possession of 35 grams or less of marijuana.
Yeah, that's correct. What they do is they give a subject to summons. If you have 2 prior convictions, then you do arrest them and book them on that. It could be misdemeanor convictions.
Thank you all for coming here tonight. I am a registered nurse, and I want to know how to speak before either the Senate or the House of Representatives in behalf of the folks who aren't able to be here, who are too sick. A lot of them can't even get up these stairs. Everybody here made it up the stairs, but I got sick patients who can't get up the stairs. So I want to speak for them on their behalf for legalizing marijuana to help them through their daily tasks. Things like eating, getting dressed, not vomiting, and being able to just function and feel normal. So I'm going to ask the question, how can I get involved with speaking in front of the House of Representatives and just, you know, because I am not afraid to speak to really anybody, as you can see.
Thank you for that. Yeah, what a great question and a great volunteer. And we would like to corral you into our group in even a deeper level after the fact, because you're exactly the kind of people that we're looking for. So thank you for that. So please.
Yeah. One quick thing I would suggest is John and I are meeting actually with the representative for the Missouri Nurses Association. Nationally, they have endorsed, and we're 99.9% sure they will in Missouri as well. So they will be having their lobby days. They had me speak briefly to their group last week about the CBD oil bill, since nurses have been written in, so that APRNs will be able to recommend. So number one, you may want to look in, if you're a member of the association, they look to be getting involved. Excuse me. And as far as coming down, when any of the bills are being presented in front of committees, we don't always get a ton of advance notice. It only has to be posted 24 hours ahead of time. But when there's the opportunity to come down to Jeff City and testify in front of the legislature, I would welcome you to come down and speak for your patients. And that's a great way to get to them. A quick story, last year, one of the reasons we had such success in committees is we had some young children in the committees that suffer from seizure disorders. And it was so overwhelming in one of the House committees that we had a representative that had spoken to John a few weeks before and said she wants nothing to do with anything cannabis, prohibition works, we're done. And during the hearing, one of the little boys had 4 seizures. And his mom was testifying. She apologized, excuse me, my son's having another seizure. And I can't tell you how many legislators had to go down and get a tissue. And a few minutes later, a representative grabbed the microphone and said, we need to help these families and we need to help them now. So it does make a difference here from the patient's point of view.
Hey, one thing is, if you go down there and you're a constituent, the legislators will make time. We'll go down there, we'll send in our card, and they'll pull them out of the House floor, or if they're in there. And then you can go ahead, and they will, if you drive all the way down to Jefferson City, they will give you the time. And what I tell people, too, is we don't go down there, we don't argue with people. They want to know where you're coming from. They want to know maybe what groups you represent. You go ahead and you tell them your story and why you support it, and then maybe ask them where they stand on it. And if they say they don't agree with it, then you say thank you and you go out the door. We don't want to argue with folks. I mean, there's enough people to work on that we can, there's enough people to try and convince, but you don't have to convince them right there on the spot.
Yeah, and I would also say that, you know, especially if you're a constituent, the legislator is usually quite happy to talk to you, and, you know, you don't have to have, a lot of people think they'll email me and be like, well, do I need to prepare something? And no, you can just go in there and have a conversation with them, and it's really not, you know, they want to hear from you, and they want to know what you think, because, you know, ultimately, you know, you really are their boss, and you really are, again, if you've taken the time to come down there, they need to, you know, get your support, because you're somebody that is going to go back and talk to people about your experience with them, and you're somebody that they are going to, you know, want to not make mad come election time. And then when it comes to committee hearings, you know, especially when we're talking about, you know, you being a medical professional and medical cannabis, something like that, a lot of, you know, the legislators they're not all necessarily going to go, oh, I automatically agree with you, but, you know, they're going to take you seriously because you have experience in this field. So, you know, in that case, you will want to prepare something, but, you know, just say, you know, here's my professional experience. Here's why I think this is good, and they'll take it seriously. They, you know, they're not always going to agree with you, but they'll take it into consideration. And I'm pretty cynical about politics, but I've actually been fairly surprised at the amount of difference that you really can make by getting involved and talking to people at the state level. It's a lot harder at the federal level, but you know, talking to people one-on-one, you really can make a difference.
Great. Before I hand the mic to this gentleman that has a question, he was able to share a story with me prior to us getting started, and I just asked, whispered in his ear, if it was okay if I shared it. Back in 1983, he got busted for growing a couple plants for personal use, and went through quite a time, it sounds like, trying to overcome that. But you think, well, grow a couple plants, your house for personal use, you're not distributing, what a bum deal. So he's lived a little bit through it, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic.
Okay, this is for Gary. In reference to your comments about tyranny, I'm reminded of a saying from one of my favorite authors, artists, William Blake. I don't know if you know him, but William Blake said, "Tyranny is the worst disease and the cause of all others."
Yeah, some wisdom in literature there. Anyone else? Yeah, real quick, there's one gentleman's hand just went up behind you.
I was just wondering about, with the language that you're potentially putting in for the full legalization, what kind of limits on businesses are there? You know, can you have a manufacturing business that makes products? Can there be large-scale industrial, you know, indoor grow rooms? What is it going to be like Colorado or more limited?
So at least at present, and you know, we are not saying that we're definitely not going to change it, but the way that it's written currently, it's fairly similar to Colorado, but there's not the 2-year residency requirement, and yeah, it's you could be both a cultivator and a distributor and a retailer. So there's no limit on vertical integration, as they call it in the market. So yeah, it's you know, we do want it to be regulated insofar as we don't want people that are going to be selling it to kids. We don't want people that are going to be selling it out of state. But other than that, you know, I think we want it to be a fairly free market and let competition dictate who is going to be the best, you know, who is going to be the best firm.
Yeah, just real quick question. I saw that Rep. Ellington's House Joint Resolution 15 got a second hearing. Is that meaningful, or are they just humoring us?
It's got second read. So once it's been second read, it'll now be assigned to a committee. So they haven't heard it in a hearing. They have not heard it in a committee yet. He filed it really late last year, so I think it was introduced. It probably did get second read, but then sometimes that may be where it stops. But that's just standard how they move through. And just FYI, Representative Ellington's joint resolution is for full legalization, and it sends it to a vote of the people.
Great. Next, Brian Fox here is a friend of mine that has a question, and before I hand the mic to him, Brian's a resident in Town and Country, and he's also an applicant for a dispensary over in Marion, Illinois. He's been in the pharmaceutical business for quite some time, has left his job, and has a group of doctors that have formed kind of a fund specifically to get involved in the marijuana business. So here's Brian.
Hi, I just have a couple of questions. One being, how can I get my law enforcement around me to join you in the fight? How do you get people to not be scared to take the step that you're taking, Mr. Wiegert?
You know, gradually these things are changing. I don't, gradually, you know, when I first started, the police were pretty much all against us. Now they're learning to live with this, and it's not so bad anymore. They're seeing that policemen in Colorado are taking jobs in security out there. They're seeing it as providing jobs for law enforcement. So I think that is gradually changing. Are you having problems down in Marion?
No, I'm just curious here in Missouri, how do you get cops here to take the stand and not fear repercussions from the departments? How do we get them, other people, to join you?
Well, I think John had some points in the legislation where some of the money that's taxed goes to police officers' pensions. I think that's a good way to cut people against it. Let's face it, right now when it comes just like asset forfeiture, policemen see the advantage of the asset forfeiture because you get it in but unfortunately they get things like MRAPs and things like that because the federal government tells you what you will spend that money on. And it can't go on to things like I would like our salaries and our pay raises and pensions and things like that, but you have to buy these toys that you really don't need. So maybe if your legislation you might look at where some of that money is seized, goes to police officers, or some of the money from the tax money actually goes into police departments, I think that would make it very easy for them to be supportive.
Okay. One more quick question. In Illinois, their patient registry is extremely difficult right now. The patients there, my application process was a pain, but not as much as what the patients have to go through there. How can we make sure Missouri doesn't have to go through months and months of paperwork and applications for each patient? How can we help that?
Well, one thing I can say to address that is I spoke with Representative Hinson last week about his medical cannabis bill, which he's calling Missourians for Compassionate Care, and I told him to make sure he put some of those things in his legislation. Unfortunately, otherwise what happens is it's left up to the department to promulgate the rules and regulations, and that's part of the problem with the process. With the CBD oil bill, everything was left up to the Department of Agriculture for people that were going to manufacture and to the Department of Health for registration, and that's not a good way to go about it. So I told him to try to put as much as he possibly can in the legislative process to take away some of those barriers from people trying to register. So I haven't yet to see what's coming out yet, but that is a good point. We don't want to make it burdensome for them to get what they need.
This seems like largely an agricultural issue. I was curious if Monsanto has a stance on this, and if farmers are not planting soybeans and corn and hemp instead, if they're going to be harmed by this, they're quite a large lobbying force.
I'll just, real quickly, one of the people that's going to file a bill for us is a farmer, and he has reached out to several groups that he's involved with in the farming community. Monsanto is not one that he's personally touched with yet. And from what I've been told is they know it's a big industry that's coming, but they don't find it as competition for what they're already doing. But, I mean, I haven't talked to them personally yet.
I think the head of Monsanto has come out ahead against this. That's my understanding.
I could believe that on a personal level, but we've not had any, and what they're doing behind the scenes, who knows, but we've not had any direct contact with them on this issue, or I have not had any direct contact with them on any issue. But yeah, I can't speak to whether they as an organization oppose or support it, but I honestly, I think they would probably eventually be interested in it because, now whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is an open question, but it's an agricultural product. They're going to have an interest in it at some point or another. So,
if I could just add to, last year during the industrial hemp hearing, we had no opposition whatsoever to the bill.
Do you think that the asset forfeiture has something to do with the overwhelming rates that the drug task forces try to go after marijuana?
Yes.
Okay. And why?
I mean, when people would come to me with marijuana information, I really didn't pique my interest. I'd blow it off and ask for something else. When you have informants giving you information, but if it's low-hanging fruit, and it's very hard to hide. My biggest marijuana arrest usually is that there's been a victim of a burglary, and you go in the house and there's maybe growing in the basement. I mean, those have been the biggest arrests I have. They're victims of a burglary, and you go down the basement, it's just full of plants. But I mean, once you encounter it, you have to seize them. But it's really not been much interest. Here's the problem, and this is the way law enforcement looks at it. If you're using cocaine or using heroin or any of the big drugs, how do you finance that? You finance that through a robbery, a burglary. So you're committing other crimes. People who use marijuana aren't holding up somebody on the corner to buy their marijuana. It's just not happening. So that's why police usually focus on the other arrests, because when you go into these other drug houses, you find things like stolen guns and stolen property and whatnot. So yeah, why do we do it? Because it does bring in some money, but I can guarantee you most of the police really could care less about it.
Do you feel like it keeps the police from allocating resources to fight crime and violent crime and some of the other more
right? I think it's a
harsh
waste.
drugs?
It's a waste of time. But in some neighborhoods, it is a problem. So if somebody's standing out there and selling marijuana and he's getting ripped off and robbed, and people are shooting at him and he's shooting back, now you got a problem in your neighborhood.
Could that possibly be the reason for the overwhelming rate of arrests in the black community over the white community when white folks and black folks use marijuana at pretty much the same rate? When there's 2/3 of the people to get arrested for marijuana are black or people of color?
I think from my experience, there's a lot more street sales in the black community than in the white community. Now, this is just from my experience, and I've made arrests with marijuana with people of both races.
Right.
And it just seems like there's more street corner type dealing going on. It's almost like more, what's the word, more sales out there in the black community. And then you also have things like hotspot policing, where you have more policemen in the black community. So who are they going to be arresting? But if you have more policemen there, they're going to be arresting blacks.
My question is that when you're lobbying, are we going up against, like, because I know private institutions are the ones that are funding for the prisons and then the pharmaceuticals. Would they really want it to be a medical thing because they've tapped into so much medicine for anxiety? Are we fighting those big businesses in the state level, or is it that our entry point, it's more federal because it's not totally being legalized through the country? Is that our little entry point that we would be able to make it legal within a state and still be able to have those little businesses for ourselves to have medical marijuana? That's what seems so big to me, to be able to fight those big businesses, especially like when you decriminalize it. If you have private institutions that are funding the prison, I mean, or our governments, isn't our government paying private institution? So I guess my question is, it seems like it's such a huge endeavor for us to get it legalized.
Well,
and then you had the DARE program. You know, I was raising my kids, and that was the main drug that was going to bring our kids to heroin and cocaine and everything. So then we have to educate them, so it's like overwhelming.
Right. Last year, through the 5 different committee hearings we had on different pieces of legislation, the only people that testified in opposition to our medical were the Osteopathic Physicians Association. No one else spoke against the bill. I have personally spoken to several of the pharmaceutical lobbyists, who actually, his comment to me last week was, we really don't care. A couple of us do have some synthetic forms. It's really not to us a competition. People will still need pharmaceuticals. They said, we really aren't going to do anything against it. Now, again, some of the larger groups, we don't know what they may be doing behind our backs, although I truly believe on some of these pieces of legislation that the legislature would let us know. But we didn't have any huge groups coming out against us last year.
I think the legislators are more afraid of their constituents on this issue.
Definitely. The voters.
And also, a lot of times it's the bureaucracies and law enforcement bureaucracies, not people like Gary, and it's drug task forces and a lot of the actual lobbying arms of law enforcement are not terribly enthusiastic about it. So we've definitely had opposition there. I mean, they've sent people to testify against our bills. And also treatment groups have sent people to testify against our bills. Those are probably the biggest groups. And they are also, incidentally, largely funded from taxpayer dollars. And taxpayer dollars that are largely coming out of people that are funding streams that are devoted to prohibition. So they see it as I think, largely a threat to their government funding.
You know, we had the Highway Patrol. Now they didn't testify in open, but they were talking to legislators, especially when it came to the industrial hemp, and they were telling people that you can hide your THC laden marijuana within the industrial hemp. And then I found out that what happens is it cross-generates and makes it useless. So But that's the trouble is people get out and put out these excuses, and it's our job to go out there and knock that down and say, hey, that is totally wrong. You're being given bad information.
Hey, thanks everyone. But as we wind down real fast, I've got to say one more special thanks. This whole event would not be possible if it wasn't for a great couple that's a really awesome staple in our community, Brendan and Ashley England. If you guys would just wave. They have been just killer volunteers, and Ashley's got a really cool art event coming up, and it will be in March. May, the other M, May at Casa Loma Ballroom, so be on the lookout for that. Afterwards, feel free to continue to ask us questions. We're going to hang out. We'd rather not haul food and booze away, so have a cocktail, hang out, ask questions, and then you can see some more about some articles that have surfaced around the country that Brendan took the time to create on the board. There's also a sample of businesses that we're soliciting, so if you know a business owner, if you have a place that you frequent and patronize, ask them to get involved, ask them to reach out and connect, and I can't thank you guys enough for all being here and getting involved, so thank you all very, very much.
Can I say one more thing, Allan? So I'd just like to thank Nebula for having this event here. I mean, we do also rent office space here, but nonetheless, we definitely appreciate having the event here tonight. I appreciate all of you guys coming again. And also, if you'd like to make a contribution, if you haven't made one yet, feel free to find Sarah. Also, Sarah, wave to everybody. Sarah Martin helped us organize this event, so thank you to Sarah. And I think that is pretty much it. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Real quick, Tenacious Eats. If you guys have not experienced Tenacious Eats, Liz Schuster is the chef. She'll put it on different places around the metro area. It's normally a small, intimate gathering, 60, 80 people. She'll do courses about every 15 or 20 minutes around a movie. So we are going to do a Culinary for Cannabis event. We got 2 in March. We're going to play Dazed and Confused, right? And The Big Lebowski. So make sure you look out for those. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.